Well, welcome today to Care Opinions podcast. We are very excited to have three of our guests with us today. We will each take a moment to introduce ourselves and let you know who we are, where we're from, and some context around the podcast today. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we live, work and meet today. We recognise the continuing connection to land, waters and culture and their time-honoured contribution of sharing learning through stories from generation to generation. I pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge elders as the holders of knowledge, law and wisdom. My name is Rebecca, often called Beck, and I want to welcome you here today. I'm the National Manager with Care Opinion Australia, and I'm honoured to be hosting our webinar or our podcast today, and thank you again for joining us. I'm now going to hand over to our speakers today to take a moment to introduce themselves.
Thank you. So my name is Audrey Coy. I'm the Executive Director for Patient Safety and Clinical Quality Directorate in the Department of Health in Western Australia. So the Patient Safety and Clinical Directorate provides strategic direction and support to hospitals, and we also have an oversight function over the safety and quality in the WA public health system. And I'm really excited to be here today with Rebecca, Katrina and Casey. So thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Audrey. So my name's Katrina Jones. I'm the Clinical Midwifery Manager at Bunbury Maternity in Western Australia. I wish to acknowledge that I'm standing on the Windani country of the Noongar people today. And I'm also very excited to be here, so thank you.
Thanks, Katrina. My name's Casey. I am the WACS Parent Education Coordinator. I'm situated also on Noongar Wadandi country. I'm passionate about providing families access to evidence-based birth education, and my role is to work with families to have the best birth possible with the circumstances that they have, and I'm excited to talk about Care Opinion.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, everybody. What I'd like to do now is just hand over to Audrey, who will share a little bit more about World Patient Safety Day and the role of the consumer voice in healthcare quality. Thank you so much, Audrey.
Thank you. So mark your calendars, because September 17th is World Patient Safety Day. This is one of the World Health Organization's global public health days. And this year, the theme is improving diagnosis for patient safety. So the importance of this day is that it actually brings together consumers, carers, families, communities, and healthcare staff and policy makers to actually show their commitment to patient safety. And one of the objectives this year is to empower patients and families to actively engage with their healthcare staff to improve the diagnostic process. And this is timely because today the conversation we're having is about how to include the consumer voice into driving safety and quality. And if I can go on to talk a little bit more about why that's important to us. So for us, consumer and carer and family feedback is a really valuable source of information. That's for both the department as well as for our health services. Your feedback comes to us through different mechanisms, and Care Opinion is one of the key mechanisms for this. And what we do with that feedback, it allows us to learn from your healthcare experiences and gives the opportunity to identify the ways in which we can do things differently, but it also gives us the opportunity to celebrate the things that are done well, because most of the things that are done very well. Within the health services, we do have what I think is a good safety culture. It embraces and it encourages consumer feedback, and we see this as a learning opportunity. Because learning, as Katrina and Casey will show, is basically fundamental to continuously improving. And I think just before I hand over, I would also like to say that in the complex environment that is health, it's important that we don't forget the individuals who are at the heart of healthcare, and that's both staff and consumers. And so in November of last year, we launched a statewide strategic and operational plan to improve safety and quality in healthcare. And those plans emphasize the importance of a person-centered approach. So consumers, families, carers, staff, and executive all contributed to this plan. We were actually touched by how much feedback we got, and it outlines our approach to better understanding what matters to consumers. In fact, there's an actual program called What Matters to You, and also giving staff the tools to support them in providing healthcare. So I'll hand back now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Audrey. That was incredibly helpful. And it's great to know there was so much input into that strategy that you've put together. And we, obviously I may be biased, but I think the consumer voice is absolutely vital to everything that is done. And as you say, so much is sitting in that commendation space, and knowing what's working really well is equally important. I do, of course, have some questions that I'd really like us to delve into together. Katrina, I'm going to pick you for my first question. And what I understand at your organisation is that you take consumer feedback incredibly seriously. So what I wanted to really delve into is, why do you take that consumer feedback so seriously, and what do you do with the stories that are published on Care Opinion?
Thanks, Rebecca. It is a big question, so I'll probably break it down a little bit in that regards. So why do I take consumer feedback so seriously? So I guess at the heart of it, if people feel strongly enough about something to take the time to write it down, to share that story, well, they deserve my time to read that story, to take it on board and then do something with it. So I think that's, fair in that regards.
Yep. If I may, it sounds like an act of respect in itself.
It is. Consumer feedback, it's such a powerful tool to shape and drive positive change. And I'd be truly foolish if I didn't actually utilise that to make the changes within my organisation. It helps, it's essential for my quality improvement within this small department, as well as utilising that across, the whole of Bunbury Hospital, within the Southwest, in that broader picture as well. And it really ensures that I'm accountable to those consumers that are using my service, that, I listen and I do something with it. It helps me to identify gaps in the services, perhaps being inside the service I don't see. So it's lovely to have that viewpoint from the, from the balcony outside, looking in and seeing what the service is that I have. It just creates a more responsive service that addresses not only the needs of the, the local population, but that individual journey. As Audrey said, it is that individual within our service that drives the care we provide. So it's looking at their journey and the touch points they've had with us and the impact we've had and how we can make that different. I guess I see consumer feedback, it's really my temperature gauge of how I'm doing.
Okay.
I receive it through a lot of different sources, being in person, telephone, online platforms such as Care Opinion, by letter, by email. I've been in Bunbury a long time. People have my email address, pick up the phone. It's great. I love that people feel open enough to let me know exactly what they're feeling. So I can receive it anonymously or, through a known consumer. Anonymous does allow people to be open and honest with their experience. They can truly share exactly what they were thinking and feeling. Personally, I prefer to have a name so I can really investigate the ins and outs of that particular consumer journey. Although I do recognise that for some, that can be confronting to speak to me or their care providers. So we need to be really respectful in that. It can also be really confronting for the staff if they have that conversation to, have someone call them upon their behaviour, their judgment and that sort of thing. So we have to protect the staff as well.
Absolutely. If I may, I wanted to ask, in terms of protecting the staff, do you think it makes a difference then that their identities are, when a comment is perhaps critical, does it make a difference to them knowing that they won't be identified publicly?
Absolutely. So it
Okay.
certainly does. I have the opportunity to speak individually with that staff member. I know who it
Mhm.
is. However,
Yeah.
it doesn't help that staff member to know that perhaps their name is out in the
Yeah.
public. So that it
Yeah.
is natural for us to be very defensive as staff to,
Yeah.
to take a backward step. But having that own anonymity allows the staff to reflect and really learn, because they're protected in that sort of manner, if that makes sense.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Absolutely, yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's the goal. It's never designed to be a punitive system. It's really designed to focus attention more on system and how something could occur, rather than you did X, Y, Z. This is a problem. It's shared learning, and you tapped into that a little earlier when you said that the stories are not just used, say, in that specific maternity setting, that they can be used more broadly. And I think that's really important.
Yes, and that probably leads into the second part of that question about what I do with the stories that are published on Care Opinion. So I use it. I absolutely use it.
Okay.
Be
Yep.
it positive and be it negative, they both have benefits, and I can utilize that feedback.
Okay.
I use it specifically to look at gaps, to build my services, to purchase equipment. If someone complains that
Okay.
my chairs are uncomfortable, gives me a great excuse to go purchase some more.
Yeah.
Because it highlights what's required with executives. Care Opinion especially is read by the higher levels within the hospital. So if there's a positive one or a negative, I get emails from them to say, hey, what are you doing about this? So
Yeah.
it enables me to make those changes. It also
Yeah.
allows me to have those conversations one-on-one with staff, to really sit down
Mhm.
and so they can reflect and learn on their experiences and the experiences of
Yeah.
others. Within our
Yeah.
hospital exec meetings,
Yeah.
we share a consumer story. It may be mine, it may be from medical ward, it may be from surgical, because we can all
Okay.
learn from a person's journey. Even if they didn't touch base with my personal service, we still learn from their experiences. So we discuss that at
Yeah.
each executive meeting. A story is shared, so we can all build our
Yeah.
self-awareness and be mindful of the impacts that we have on the actions that we take. So that is really a powerful part of our
Yeah.
organisation, which is fantastic.
I think that's incredibly powerful to know that it is that shared learning, because what can happen, one thing we notice is so many of the stories often talk less about the outcome, the clinical outcome, and talk more about that emotional impact that it's had, and that certain acts of kindness go a long way, where we start to hear now about stories or experiences of care being healing from a previous experience where maybe compassion or respect wasn't there. And so I think it's an interesting thing the stories bring out, whereas it's not, or it is less. Sometimes it's focused on clinical outcomes, but so often it's more that in the moment impact. And obviously your team and the hospital are learning.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not just at
Wonderful.
that executive level. We discuss it, we utilise that within our media posts, within emails out to staff, and those sorts of things. Put it on the notice board here so that
Yeah.
the women that are walking past heading into labour can see, positive or negative, and what we've done. And it is
Yeah.
really, really important that they know that I have taken it seriously. I am doing something
Yeah.
about it. As small as purchasing a recliner chair within the nursery to as big as
Yeah.
generating a lactation consultant service. Both
Yeah.
ends of the
Yeah.
spectrum. It all makes a
Yeah.
difference. So, yes,
Fantastic.
thank you.
So, Casey, what I'd really like to learn from you, what we see in terms of this positive birth program that's launched is that it started in one region and it has really spread. It's going now through telehealth, and we just get so much feedback coming through Care Opinion, so much of it really positive, really detailing that empowerment that it's given to consumers with the content they learn. What do you think it is that's driving that level of feedback and engagement that you're getting from your consumers and the families?
Oh, thanks, Rebecca. I think probably a good place to start would be a really brief overview of what it is so that people know what it is that
Yep.
we're teaching. But basically, it's the program started in 2019 at Bunbury Hospital. Thank Katrina for listening to feedback and helping us implement that. We knew that the research showed that if we were able to implement an independent, comprehensive complementary therapy birth education program, that we could improve the clinical outcomes, but I think even more importantly for a lot of people, there's emotional outcomes. And, you know, in a world where 1 in 3 women will experience birth trauma, to get them through as safely, and safely could be emotional safety or cultural safety or physical safety, then that's going to be really beneficial. So to break that down, independent means like a program created independently of the hospital. Comprehensive.
Okay.
Yep, comprehensive.
I didn't realize that. I actually thought the hospital had created that program.
No, so the Positive Birth Program is a Hypnobirthing Australia curriculum, which linked in very nicely with all of the requirements for our childbirth education. So independent, the reason being is that it explores lots of topics that may or may not be supported by services, and that's important for families to understand so that they're able to come to a place of informed decision making, so that we can give them the information to then go on and provide the consent for the care that we provide for them.
Excellent. So I didn't realize as well that it was really tapping into that informed consent space, which is, you do hear about this, people either consenting, and in that labour space, my recollection going back a bit is that you're not really thinking too well, other than please make this pain stop at times.
Yeah. So if you don't know what you don't know unless you know. So our opportunity there is to provide families with the knowledge so that they know, and then they can collaborate really carefully with their care providers to work out, care that's specialized for them. And so comprehensive is all the ins and outs of a normal birth class that you would see in a hospital. So the way the body works and the hormones work and the stages of labor and the pain relief options and I guess navigating things that might crop out that might have been outside of what they had hoped for. So it might be different interventions. But then on top of that, interwoven through the program is the complementary therapy side of things, which is your breathing techniques and your acupressure and your massage, and working in partnership with the birth partner or the care provider or whoever else enters that space. Releasing fears, learning how to communicate. So that's what the program does. It's a very wholesome whole program, working with families to have a sort of a positive experience with their birth, whatever that might look like for them. And the parent education that we offer at WAX has this huge consumer focus. So the Positive Birth Program is run by Hypnobirthing Australia. We've also got the 4th trimester breastfeeding and early parenting program that was generated out of consumer feedback. So I'm sure we'll probably talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But the programs have really been professionally designed to appeal to a really large variety of consumers. And because we have people from all the way from the south, all the way up to the north, we have people who, have PhDs and people who might have left school early in high school. So we really have to appeal to a very broad demographic. And so that's what the programs have been designed to do. And I think the other reason why we get such great reviews or such a volume of feedback is that those midwives that teach the classes they've undertaken certification to become educators. And I think that makes a very big difference in the way that information's received as well.
Yep. So I was just going to ask, if I may, do you find the educators ask for the feedback? Do they actively have conversations, or is it more just making sure there's information around to be found?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole way through the program, we empower them, and it's part of the communication side of things. If you're not communicating, then we're not going to be able to meet your needs. And so that's where that comes in. So we do, really, I think a lot of the reason they feel compelled to share stories, whether it's something that we need to work on or whether it's something that they've taken advantage of and liked, is because of this empowerment. And so, like, I think when you think about hospitals, there's a paradigm that happens between a consumer and a health service, right? So when a family steps foot into a health service, there's this power imbalance. And simply because that's the way it's always been. But I know that as a health service, we're working really hard to partner with the consumers, actively get them involved in their care. So that paradigm is shifting. But
we do see that a lot in the feedback that's coming through about the program. Is so often consumers are talking about the fact that without that knowledge, they wouldn't have felt confident to speak up. And as you touched on before, it's that concept of if you don't communicate with us, we don't know, so how can we meet those needs? So I think that's obviously going very well, and it's very well appreciated.
Yeah, that's right. So, despite us working really hard to bridge this gap or change this paradigm where, consumers actually are actively involved in their care, they still perceive us in the health system as the authoritative knowledge. So what that means is, and I guess the problem with that is that we're dealing with people. And there's so many nuances involved when you start individualizing care. So they have to realize that they're the authoritative knowledge. They know themselves. They know what is important to them and therefore their babies. And so when you give families and you empower families to take ownership and responsibility of that, then they're much better placed to partner with us as their care providers. They're much better placed to use us then as a tool to gain the knowledge they need, to get the information that's specific to their needs, rather than us just providing them knowledge that's been created for a generalized many. So in essence, I guess we're giving women back their power.
You really, you're activating them, aren't you? Activating them to own their care, which is incredible. Then another question for you, Casey, is how do you use the stories to continually improve the Positive Birth program?
Yeah, so that's part of the curriculum, is that we use storytelling to run themes and provide knowledge. And as you talked about in your acknowledgement of country, the Aboriginal people have been doing this forever. So just taking a page out of that book, we found since running the programs that the families became really receptive to birth stories. So it might have been that we ran a class and a birth story had come across my table the day before and I would read it out. And then when I got feedback from that family, it was, I really like that story, was really empowering. And it just, it made me feel so strong and motivated, like I could actually do it because someone in my suburb was doing it, so it was relatable. It made the content relatable. So what happens with the stories is now we've embedded quite a few stories throughout, and they vary. Like there's spontaneous vaginal births at home all the way through to really complex. I think one story that we've just started sharing is a mama who's ended up with a non-elective cesarean section under a general anaesthetic, who's come away really positive about, not of course the birth that she wanted, but the way she was able to work through that birth and felt supported by her care providers and listened to, and at the end of the day had the safest and best birth possible for herself and her baby.
I remember that story, and I think what really stuck out is, I think there was a sentence in there saying, I never thought I would say that, and I think it was something like an emergency cesarean under general anaesthetic was such a positive experience. It was really quite powerful.
Yeah. So that's like, I still get goosebumps. Like, it doesn't matter how many times I read these stories. That is the impact that we're working on achieving with these classes. And these stories are what then inspire other people to reflect on their births and sure, maybe it was very complicated and maybe not everything was the way that they had hoped, but they might go, wow, geez, I was also really strong. I was actually really amazing. So it puts some other thoughts into their head about the things that were positive for them. So
That's
yeah, they
wonderful.
they get a different idea of how different eventualities might play out, and then the ripple effect of those stories. We'll never know how far-reaching it is, but then in turn they become empowered to tell their own stories. But yeah, I mean, certainly, the positive stories are amazing for empowering the families for their next birth, but also it also gives a voice for the people accessing our service, which is what Katrina was talking about. You know, that storytelling provides us as a service with information on stuff that we can reflect on and improve on. Because at the end of the day, we can always do better. Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. I was going to ask you, actually, Katrina, the same question, because I think there's different ways you can look at this in terms of improving. And as Casey said, positive feedback is still in that same vein. You just keep making it better and it's improving experiences for others.
Absolutely. And the great thing about positive, that stories and that feedback that we receive is the great impact it has upon the staff and the organisation, because it truly helps to motivate and build the staff confidence to go, hey, I'm actually doing okay. That the women that we provide care for actually value the effort that we're doing. Nobody comes to work to make anybody feel bad or to do things wrong. But we often always receive that negative feedback to say, you've done it wrong again, you've done it wrong again. So that positive feedback and I go out of my way to provide that to each individual staff member, say, hey, you've been named in here and this is awesome and I'm really proud of how you've worked. Often comes with a chocolate frog in that regard. I will also, those emails I'll actually send out to all the staff, because everybody is a team. It's not always just one person that has that moment with that woman. To get positive feedback, it's often that entire journey that family has had with us. So it's a team effort. So I send it out to everybody. And I must admit, I actually also include all the exec when I send it out, because I'm very proud of my team and I want them to know it. I want them to know that they have a great staff within their organisation. So it's just a simple part of my practice, and it should be. It makes such a huge difference to the staff, that they go, great, I'm appreciated, and everybody knows it, which is fantastic. So
we had one hospital I was speaking to, and it was a director came to visit the team. I think it was the nurse unit manager at the time, to say, I knew your team were doing well, but wow, this is really incredible, and it's really amplifying the excellent work staff do, which they so often do. And so I'm really pleased that the staff it's really changing, it's boosting things for them. It's wonderful. In terms of any sort of, we consider all feedback to be gold, realistically, because, you guys have talked earlier, you don't know what you don't know. I know that at times, if there is feedback that is a little bit more critical, one of the things we talk about is trying to focus, and I touched on this before, a little bit less on exactly what happened and more on how could they have come to this recollection. You might have staff saying, that is not what happened. I remember that experience and that's not what happened. How do you use those sorts of stories in that situation to still improve, even if maybe a person's not reflecting things exactly as it went down? They've got their own filters to look at the world through. And I just wondered if either Katrina or Casey, you could both sort of, let me know what you think about that, especially in conversations with staff.
After you, Casey.
Okay. Always tricky to read when someone's had a hard time of things, mainly because we actually really care. And so when we hear that someone has had a bad experience, I guess your first instinct would be to react. But actually the best thing to do is just to sit with that for a moment and explore why they've come to that resolution and why they feel that way, and then decide on what the next step is. So, for example, with our classes, we have a team of about 20 midwives now that teach all over WA. And so we'll do reflective exercises. So if some feedback's come across, we'll either meet or we'll do voice saved messages to each other to work through it. So like I said, the staff are all trained to be educators, and this does impact how we present information. But we are also really aware of different people's biases, and how that they are filtered through. So, look, we're never going to, like I said before, we're not going to know the ripple effects of our words. They are far-reaching. But I think the feedback gives a good representation of the information that we're getting. So when you get feedback, you'll start seeing themes emerging. Okay, so you might, we get lots of really positive feedback, and then we might get one that's a bit more complicated. And that doesn't mean that we need to particularly do anything with that. But as we see themes generated, we realize that we can potentially make changes or improve. So whatever comes across our desk is an amazing opportunity to reflect. And what we know about communication is that it really does happen mostly on the listener's terms. So that everything that we say actually gets filtered through all their frames of references, all their lifetime conditioning, all their biases, all their preconceived ideas about what's going to happen. So when we get to the end of the class, the whole message doesn't actually get through, and it can be interpreted completely differently. So having that awareness just allows us to tailor the education to that vast majority, but also, like I said, make changes when we need to.
That is a fantastic perspective, honestly, to just really consider and to pull out the themes. You know, if something's coming up repeatedly, then, you know, it's something to look out for.
For
we
example,
often encourage. No, you go.
We updated our dates and times because we started getting a common thread of people saying that they couldn't make it on a Wednesday evening or a weekend. And we also had a common theme coming through saying that families were feeling prepared for their fourth trimester but didn't know anything about mother crafting. So we then were able to start changing the program to suit those needs.
If I can touch, that's something I think that's really powerful here, is it's not necessarily diving straight into we need to investigate. It's more, you don't always need to. Of course, there's times when you do, but there are times where you just look at the service offering and as a whole look at the system, how's the process working, and adjust. So, no, thank you. Katrina, I'd love to hear from you in that regard.
I think Casey summed it up beautifully in that regard. Probably just a couple of things from my perspective. From as a manager, I did note earlier that I don't particularly, like the anonymity of some feedback, because you read it and you go, that couldn't have happened. It just physically wasn't possible, or and those sorts of things, and that. It saddens me that the women have gone away thinking that is the truth, and it is from their perspective, but it's not the whole story. So I really like to try and reach out to those families and say, please, here's my number, here's my email, please contact me, because I'd like to sit down and discuss it with them and try and give them some clarity around that story, because you're right, those ripples of an event that perhaps never could have happened does cascade, through that, and they can carry that for a long time, for their lifetime. So I like to try and help and assist, in that response. In order to do that, we have commenced a birth reflections course clinic in Bunbury. So we provide this as a service. So women who have questions and they just want to go, so what happened? And get that clarity, can sit down with the midwife. We have the notes, we go through it, and it just answers those questions, because we know that women at the end of a very long labour, a non-elective Caesar after a general anaesthetic, we're all feeling a little foggy. So you have questions and you need to discuss it. So we offer that service for anybody who wishes to attend. And that's why I really try and reach out on Care Opinion to say, please, give me a call,
Yes.
in that regards. No judgmental. I just want to have a chat.
I think that's important. We often it's tempting when it comes to asking people to reach out to take the lens from what the service needs, like we want to improve, or we need to investigate, where that can probably be very daunting for some people. Like you talked about before, it's scary, talking. And I think the way you just framed that's really important, is we just want to have a chat. It doesn't have to be the start of anything official. I just want to talk to you. And I think that's important. And putting your contact details in, you don't hide behind a shared generic inbox or anything. You're you.
Yeah,
I'm Katrina.
absolutely.
Please talk to me.
And as Casey said, we're here to care, and you may
Yeah.
have been discharged from our service and gone home and had a baby with 18 months ago. I still care that your journey wasn't, as it should have been, or that you're still unclear about what happened. And it does help to improve my service, but hopefully I can also help to improve, your well-being and your parenting and that sort of thing. So it works both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Audrey, I know we've heard so much about this program and how the feedback is being used. It's so beautiful and powerful. I also just want to see if there's anything any sort of take-home message you'd like to be able to, for staff members particularly, to walk away from in terms of this patient feedback, or if there's anything that's really struck you from the conversation.
A couple of things have struck me. I think if I think about it from the patient or the consumer perspective, I really liked how Casey talked about the paradigm of what it feels like if you're a consumer coming into hospital, and that power dynamic. And I was actually thinking, even as someone who works in health, we all experience that. And then I guess if you multiply that by whatever factor for a lay consumer, it's actually really hard to ask for things, particularly depending on what lens and what background you come from. So the aspect that I really resonated with was the bit about empowerment. And because that's really what we all want in our lives, isn't it? To feel like you've got control over what's happening to you, particularly at something that's quite as monumental as childbirth.
Yes, absolutely.
No, so I really enjoyed that bit. I think I kind of took, like Katrina did, that bit about when people give anonymous feedback, because the question that came to my mind was, what do we need to do to make it safer for people to give us feedback and not feel like they have to be anonymous?
Yep. I think that's so important, and I think that can be the missing link. And I understand that when services ask for people to make contact, it's coming from an authentic place. But it is the power imbalance. Often people come to Care Opinion because they're scared or they're just not sure. And I often think about it as it's like a bridge. You've got somebody and they don't know what it's going to be like at the other end. They want to do this, but they don't know if they'll be welcome when they get there. And so using Care Opinion can be a bit of a bridge to understand a little bit more about who you're going to be talking with, what they would look to do with it. And that in itself is the act of empowerment, sort of information equals power in that way. So that's how we often sort of think about it, is it's just that it's that vehicle. It doesn't have to end on Care Opinion. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't have to. And that's where the value of being able to post more than one response, you can still close that loop to say, oh my gosh, thank you for reaching out. So other people get to know that there was some form of resolution in the end. So
absolutely. And it's all about trust and the relationship, isn't it? Particularly as many consumers would be coming back again. And I can understand why in that setting they might want to be anonymous.
That's right. Katrina, I suppose I'll ask you the same thing just as we close out for this session. And also, Casey, I'd love to know if there's anything that really stands out to you, or if there's something you'd really like people to know who are watching this podcast.
I guess my final comment is I have a motto that says never waste a good crisis. So I guess in this case, it's never waste feedback. It's always valuable. So that would be my final remark, never waste feedback.
Fantastic. And Casey?
Well, Katrina did the employees, I should say. So I will talk to the people and say that just when you're receiving information, be aware of yourself. You're the authoritative knowledge. Take the information that you need. Leave what you don't. There's lots of information out there. It doesn't mean it's all for you. And keep communicating, because your stories inspire and they invoke change.
Beautiful.
Can I have 2 bites of that cherry?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to also say thank you to Katrina and Casey for the amazing work. And just the, the passion and the excitement and the joy that you bring to it. And also thank you, Rebecca and Sarah, for just making it available.
Well, thank you, everybody listening today. I hope it's been incredibly useful and helpful to you and inspiring, as it has been to me. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.